Yeah, thank you all for coming. What I thought I would do instead of doing the usual reading of biographies, which you can, of course, you can find online, I thought I would read passages from their works with the idea that then you'll be enticed enough to buy their books. So this is just a taste, and then we'll do. I'll ask a few questions. Then I came up with this brilliant idea of just throwing words and then see what you guys are going to say about those words, and then we'll open up and have a conversation amongst all of us. Sounds like a plan? All right. Okay. So, so let me begin by reading a poem from Susan Chiguli called "The Leash That Is English," and her book is at the back, like I said. The leash that is English. Gauge me in language, tongue of fire, baptizing me in the Jordan of culture. I speak in a tongue, contradicting me. I express in me in fragmentation. I patch myself in a tongue, I a patchwork of language. The ego has covered me with its wings and clutched me in its claws. It has smothered my breath. I am a gagged being. The wings beat hard upon me. I want to rise above the din of wings. I must rise. I must thrash the wings. I must be hard above the din of wings. I must be seen despite the spread of wings. Susan. And then from Olumide. And I'll ask you about the titling of chapters, but I'm just going to read the first passage, just a paragraph from the opening. If not for Abu flicking his head back every so often, waiting a split sec, full on profile, to make sure Carl was keeping track, it would have been impossible to tell them apart. Those two like twins. The funny thing, Abu's parents already had twins, and they were a sweet but annoying 7 years old. It was almost as if Abu had needed to find his own match, so he had someone to leave the house with. Even funnier, his mother and later the dad accepted Carl as a brother from another mother. Meaning, Carl was in and out of their house like trains out of St. Pancras station. More in than out, actually. And to bring that funny, what a coincidence thing home, they even looked alike. Carl's face a tad longer, shoulder narrower, hair cropped, eyes much more dreamy, both their lips full in a different way. But still, if you had thought about it, you'd say, the works. You'd say, dang, those are some alike-looking teenagers. Their friendship must have rubbed onto their bodies, accepting they were a pair, in tandem, teamwork. Olumide. And then from Suleiman, the broken language. When you learn a language as an adult, words are like razors on your tongue. The sentences you speak are so wounded that they fall apart when they leave your mouth. Remember this, I well Hegos, me fight, had Hagos do run follow. I him field of landlord arrive sorghum. Tall me as clouds, sudden calm rain. See I Hagos run here, there follow him. I find he room to our landlord, belong Hegos, in go to window. Go I take long high shelves everywhere. Books big now I see. Why this room close, always no one income. Workers told were Hagos wet clothes off. Take on their chair. This is a lot of work. Take on the chair. No, put he book lift, this book notice. I know words, has pictures. Only cry want I never Hego see happy. As this when I sudden voice hear. Dagger's name is Hegos fell book to floor. Look for his clothes. No wait say landlord at book. By Hegos feet point he on page. Open his woman like Hegos naked. See hey landlord. Daggers this paint, I this painting, see in Paris. I hereafter painter won't become, and I wish a woman, her bishop paint like her, me let her eyes off Hegos. Rest on woman in bucket bath. Landlord Hegos hand holding, still but say he landlord, no girl from here. Find I who this accept. All say no to Hegos. The landlord say this Hegos, I teach you paint, really no need to be. Suleiman. And then Finston. Solitude 61. In my belly there rises a river, wretched and lazy, vast and dirty, nasty and bleak, a river in advanced state of dysentery. Solitude 71. Jittery like a dog, bored is the river all day long, whining without knowing why. whining since Babel, since old Noah and his flood, since the prophet Ezekiel, since Sister Abigail, it's not describes an absurd longevity. Solitude 52. Jittery like a dog, and the fast that thaws between two sneers, I ditch my body to the first corner, in the background of the sky, unsheathing its drool. Well, anyway, I had to go back with the dogs, the solar eclipse over Katako Kombe too. Solitude 73. Jittery like a dog, and I avow my leprosity, and I avow my fight to vomit, and I avow my Russian origins, and I avow the extracts of my body, of my dismembered body, as it was in the beginning. Finstone. What is the role of biography in your writing? I didn't mean to ambush you. No, but I'm asking. I mean,
you didn't say that one. Did you?
Yeah. So what? Yeah. Like how does biography, about how you have lived your lives? How does that end up figuring or being in your writing? Yeah, we can start over here and then work our way down.
I knew that Mukoma would give very hard questions, but I never anticipated that they would be this hard.
And it's only the first one.
I think that to me, writing is life, and therefore, because it's life and life is lived experience, therefore what I write is part of what I live. It isn't that I write, I don't have a sense of writing my life always, but I know that when I live my life, what I live, what I see, where I have been, what I've gone through, the pains, the joys, what I feel comes through to my writing. Because writing is, to me, an intense interaction with other people, with life, and therefore I get what I observe, what I sense, what I distill from how I live into my writing. I don't know if I'm answering this question.
Yeah, we agree.
For me, is it on? I think there's different types of writing. So a novel or really long piece of fiction, I think for me is something to work out. So I'm working with ideas. I want to learn something and I'm searching towards something. So biography doesn't necessarily come in with plot and maybe also not with characters, but of course you're coming back to be making it alive. You're using everything you have. So I might use the emotions that I have experienced somewhere else to bring it in. But I think if it's a novel, it's probably further away from my own biography. So it's more about ideas in my case.
Is this on? Yeah. I think that's an interesting question, actually, because usually you get asked, is this autobiographical? But this is quite interesting because I think one of the reasons, especially novelists, we get defensive when we get asked this question is because we know, we don't want to underplay the role of imagination in our work, and so therefore we get defensive. But if you see, I think it's really important also to admit that part of your life experiences work themselves through certain characters. And I think, looking back at my novel, for example, I think I have traits in all the characters, the sex worker, the Saba, the Hagos, I think there's elements of that, obviously they come from me. I give birth to those characters. And so therefore, as a result, they carry some, it's like, it's giving birth. And so, naturally there is that process of, passing through certain traits. Yeah.
So, pour moi, le côté biographique commence avec déjà le choix de la langue. Je suis né au sud du Congo, à Lubumbashi, Et mes grands-parents, mes ancêtres sont venus d'une autre région. À l'époque coloniale, on avait besoin d'une main-d'œuvre abondante pour travailler dans les mines du Sud. Et donc, ils ont fait cette migration avec leur propre langue. Mais ils ne nous ont pas appris leur langue. C'est-à-dire que je n'ai pas le français et le swahili, deux langues que j'ai appris de manière, je dirais, autodidacte. Pour moi, les langues, apprendre une langue, il y a toujours dans l'apprentissage d'une langue quelque chose de très autodidacte.
Für mich beginnt der biografische Anteil eines literarischen Werkes schon damit, welche Sprache ich auswähle, um dieses Werk zu schreiben. Ich bin im Südkongo geboren, in Lombashi, aber meine Vorfahren, meine Großeltern waren aus einem anderen Teil des Landes dorthin gezogen. Zur Zeit des Kolonialismus wurden nämlich viele Arbeitskräfte gebraucht, aber man hat ihnen eben nicht Französisch oder Swahili beigebracht und deswegen habe ich mir diese Sprachen autodidaktisch beigebracht und ich denke, immer wenn man eine Sprache lernt, beginnt das autodidaktisch.
Et aujourd'hui, je vis en Autriche et donc j'écris aussi en allemand, c'est-à-dire que j'écris dans deux langues, le français et l'allemand, mais j'ai fait aussi beaucoup de performances. Quand je fais des performances, j'utilise le swahili comme langue, comme une langue, plutôt une langue orale.
Jetzt lebe ich in Österreich. Ich schreibe mittlerweile auch auf Deutsch. Das heißt, ich schreibe in 2 Sprachen, Deutsch und Französisch. Ich mache aber sehr viel Live-Performance und dort verwende ich Swahili eben als Sprache einfach für eine mehr direkte Vermittlung.
Donc, voilà.
Yeah, so I wasn't quite sure how to ask this question because we're all coming from different places, right? But I was wondering if you could just take a few sentences or a few minutes to talk about the politics of where you're coming from.
I'm shaking my head because I come from the UK and Brexit is not going to be explained in a few sentences.
Well, at least you don't live in Brussels. So, yeah, exactly. I mean, I've no idea what's going to happen, But I was thinking about it actually, like how relaxed I am, as opposed to I read a lot of British expats outside the UK who are really nervous about the whole thing. But it's because I've been there, It's like I've done it, and so therefore it's like, whatever happened will happen. So.
Are you refusing to answer the question?
You don't live in Uganda, so you don't know what it is. It's a really complicated question to answer. You don't know what to say when someone says, what is the politics? Because it's a really messy affair.
But I think also the body has its own politics. I mean, wherever you go, right? And how you relate to the society is... Yeah, we're not trying to do a coup here, but
it looks like I might.
We are.
It looks like I might have to rephrase the question. Okay, what is
pizza?
Okay, yeah.
Pour moi, c'est que tout se passe plus ou moins bien au Congo parce qu'après un régime plutôt dictatorial de 18 années, on a une Regierung, c'est-à-dire un gouvernement qui essaie de bouger les lignes, de changer les choses.
Im Kongo, muss ich sagen, geht es mittlerweile einigermaßen gut. Nach 18 Jahren Diktatur haben wir jetzt eine Regierung, die wirklich versucht, Dinge zu verändern und ans Laufen zu bringen.
Mais en Autriche, de plus en plus, il y a une montée de l'extrême droite. Mais pour moi, en même temps, j'essaie de voir, non pas seulement la politique, mais ce qui s'est fait dans les coulisses, ce qui s'est fait dans le noir. C'est-à-dire, d'une part, il y a la montée de l'extrême droite, mais d'autre part, il y a des initiatives privées, des initiatives politiques, culturelles, intellectuelles, des gens qui font à ce que les lignes puissent bouger, qui font à ce que le monde devienne meilleur qu'avant.
All right, so,
ich versuche aber nicht nur, also in Österreich ist es wiederum schwierig, denn dort erstarkt die Rechte ja immer mehr. Ich versuche aber nicht nur auf die Politik zu schauen, sondern auch, was in der Zivilgesellschaft passiert. Und da passiert einfach sehr, sehr viel in Initiativen, privaten, kulturellen. Ich sehe viele Leute, die sich anstrengen, damit einfach die Welt besser wird.
Yeah, so... let me rephrase the question, because I think only Fiston answered the question. Okay, what is Uganda to you? What is Nigeria to you? What is Eritrea to you? I know they're a bit unfair questions, but I think I'm trying to get to the idea of what is home, right, or homes.
Right. I'm almost tempted to answer your question with a poem.
And that would be great, actually. Yeah.
Yes. So I don't know. I don't read the whole poem, but I can read a few. This poem is called "I Love Home."
Oh, there we go.
I've increasingly been writing about the notion and idea of home and how home presents itself. How Uganda, in Uganda, I don't necessarily only see the politics. I actually primarily see the people and how the people relate to me, and I relate to them as a member of their community. And I see the thing about Uganda, that what moves Uganda is perhaps not simply the so-called government. What moves Uganda is the people in Uganda. So I'm going to read this poem that I wrote when I saw a friend at a distance and wanted to wave. And I was waving to the friend. He couldn't see me. He was busy on his mobile phone, laughing on his mobile phone. And I waved so long and he didn't see me. And I thought, well, I was so disappointed that he didn't see me. So I went and made myself comfortable. Consoled myself with writing a poem. It's called "I Love Home." I don't know if this is working well. I love home. For those people who find laughter such company, laugh like they're falling apart or coming loose, with tears gliding down their cheeks, and these days, all this on a mobile phone. For laughter that sows, echoing in every nook, for laughter sprayed on blossoming bushes, for laughter that escapes out of caves, rising to greet the sun, for laughter of mobile phone to mobile phone. For those people who had dance lessons in the womb, who touch the floor, making it worship them, who turn this way and create magic, turn that way and send a billion angels begging them never to stop. For them who whistle songs and cast you into singing along despite yourself. For those people who grieve, calling upon 1,000 names, remembering name upon name, revisiting each story of a life which matters to them, each face of love. For those people who feel their sorrow from within to without, who crawl and scratch the earth as if she would answer their questions. For those who each day look upon the sky and beseech God, continuing to love, to hope, to live as if life is always. For those people who never let go of themselves, of people who paint their landscapes, for people who make sadness part of happiness, an element of peace, of seeing before, now and forever. For my people who make me long to understand what I do not understand.
I don't know how you guys are going to follow that, but well.
The same. Thank God I'm not sitting next to her.
I think these are two completely different questions for me. So one is, what is Nigeria to you and what is home to you? And I think this actually links in with your question about biography. So I think when I think of Nigeria, there's also a sense of deep longing, and it has to do with, I have a daughter who's 3. I lived in Nigeria. I moved to Nigeria when I was 1, and I left when I was about 6. So that time that she's at age she's now, I watch her and I think that's when I was probably the happiest. We were in Nigeria, and then there's a fissure there. So I think the initial gut reaction is that. So that's a very personal note. And this idea of home, I have been asked a lot of times because of this notion of the Afro-German and being, which is usually described as being in between cultures. And I think over time, for me, this has become a thing of being beyond. Home is in those hard to grasp places, is in language, is in voice, is in something that's never really just a place and never really just people, but it's what is happening between people. Something like you describe is all the things it evokes. So Nigeria is that to me, of course. As soon as I arrive, that is there. But it's also so many other things. I don't know if I made sense because she's really intimidated me now. In a very beautiful
Yeah, but
way.
also I'm just randomly looking at chapter 25 of your book, where the first lines or the chapter heading is, "Home is always holding hands without touching."
Wow.
There you go. That's what I wanted to say, right? Yeah, but it's that idea that it's something that is there. You don't have to. I think it's the subtle thing. It's the nuance that you cannot describe, much more than the obvious things. You know, it's like things that trigger when people talk about memories, and those of us who live in university, this idea of triggering is never actually the obvious thing. It's the, you know, it's the smell, or it is something that is like something else that make you remember this feeling of home. Yeah.
I find that question actually seriously overrated. To me, it's like, look, it's like this continuous need for a lover, for example. I think once you learn how to make love to yourself, you really, everything else is secondary. And so once you know how to live outside home, the concept of home becomes redundant. For me anyway, and you know, this idea, because I've lived since I was 2 in different places, it's the idea of home is completely eroded from my mind, you know. And I think I really don't have, I'm not restless. I'm not like, the same with identity or labeling or, you know, this idea of having to force myself into a box. I prefer freedom, I prefer the air. And so I don't really necessarily see home attached to a land, but necessarily to my own body and feelings.
Also, pour moi, je ne vis pas au Congo en ce moment. Et pour moi, le pays, c'est la bière. Au Congo, on a dans chaque ville toujours 2 bières qui sont en concurrence. Et pour moi, le pays, c'est la Simba et la Tembo.
Tempo. Ja. Ich lebe ja im Moment nicht im Kongo und für mich wird quasi das Heimatland durch Bier ausgedrückt. Also Heimat hat mit Bier zu tun. Im Kongo gibt es 2 konkurrierende Biermarken. Also ist für mich Heimat Simba und Tembo.
Also hier in Köln, wir haben Kölsch. Also le pays, c'est aussi la rumba. Je viens du Congo et on est bercé de l'enfance par cette musique, par la rumba, parce que la rumba fait partie de notre identité, de notre culture, mais aussi elle joue aussi le rôle de garde-mémoire, de mémoire.
Mémoire. Für mich ist aber auch Heimat die Rumba, denn bei uns zu Hause wird man von der Kindheit an in diesem Rhythmus der Rumba gewiegt, gehört zu unserer Kultur und fungiert auch als Gedächtnisspeicher sozusagen.
Et à l'autre pays, c'est la nourriture, les fèves de manioc.
Und zum Heimatgefühl gehört natürlich auch das Essen, zum Beispiel die Maniokblätter.
L'autre pays, c'est aussi la famille. Donc, quand je ne suis pas au pays, le pays représente pour moi la famille, les amis, les lieux de mémoire qui me lient au pays, là où j'ai grandi, ainsi de suite.
Für mich ist dann aber andererseits zu Hause auch die Familie. Wenn ich nicht zu Hause bin, dann wird das Zuhause ausgedrückt durch Familie, durch Freunde und eben Orte, die mit bestimmten Erinnerungen verbunden sind.
Mais il y a aussi l'autre pays, Graz, où je vis. Voilà, pour moi, le pays, c'est une panoplie de choses qui, peut-être, qui n'ont rien à voir en commun. Il y a ce pays physique, le Congo, mais il y a aussi un pays rêvé, imaginaire, qui fait partie de mon parcours. J'ai vécu en Allemagne, j'ai vécu en Autriche, je suis souvent à Bruxelles et en France. C'est dire que le pays, pour moi, c'est tout ce qui me constitue. C'est la langue allemande, c'est le français, c'est le swahili, c'est le chiluba, les langues que je parle qui me portent.
Ja, und dann gibt es eben noch die Heimat Graz, wo ich ja jetzt lebe. Das heißt, Heimat ist für mich eigentlich eine Vielzahl von Dingen, die scheinbar nichts miteinander zu tun haben. Es gibt den Kongo, dann gibt es aber auch noch so eine Art imaginäres Land, dem ich entgegenstrebe, und die ganzen Länder, die einfach Teil meiner Biografie sind. Ich habe in Deutschland, Österreich, Frankreich, Belgien gelebt. Ich spreche diese ganzen Sprachen, und auch diese Sprachen sind für mich zu Hause, weil sie mich tragen.
So let me ask. So, I think as a moderator, you have two audiences. One is yourself, and the other one is you. So this is a question for myself, really. But you're welcome to listen in. Yeah. So no, it's actually, I'm joking. It's a question for all of us. But so I think our generation is producing a different kind of literature. And I think we are, as from your answers, we are writing from multiple places, right? Or in between places, multiple places, and so on and so forth. So where do you see yourself, if at all, within the African literary tradition, if at all? Right? Or to ask differently, what's your relationship to African literature?
There we go again. I feel almost apologetic going back to something that has been a center stage since the big 1962 Writers' Conference in Uganda at the university where I teach, Makerere. The whole concept of how do you define African literature, because I have real problems with defining, getting this whole huge animal called, African literature, and putting it in a box or in a cupboard and being able to put a label, African literature, because I feel like whatever we conceive or think of as African literature cannot be labeled. It defies description. As far as I'm concerned, it defies being put together. Although I am also aware that you cannot live without naming things, because then how do you relate to those things if they have no identity? I can relate to people when I can say Olumide, so I know who I'm talking to. There is that identity that I can liaise with or interact with. But African literature to me is so diverse. In fact, we have courses at Makerere. We have a course in the in Introduction to African Literature. And I always see people grappling with what to include and what to exclude. And the whole idea of the canon. What is the canon? It's very hard. But one thing I want to say is that I think it's that diversity that then becomes so important. That's why I think this literary festival to me has been extremely enriching, extremely significant, because it has dealt with something that has always been with us, the idea of literature in translation, literature in African languages. See, because when I start to think of literature in African languages, I begin to relate more with that literature as African. Of course, then it raises a number of questions too. But I feel so at home when I hear you read like you read yesterday in East course, I can't really pronounce properly. You know, I feel so moved when I hear someone read, let's say in Yoruba, or when I hear someone read in Luganda, even when I don't understand. There is something, I don't know what it is, that triggers a kind of understanding that is way beyond just listening to words. It's listening to words, it's listening to feeling, it's listening to existence almost.
Can I come in here? Or?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can jump in here.
No, I think we need to analyze the question itself. I mean, when you mean by African tradition, do you mean, for example, just like, West Africa, from Kenya to Uganda, because that has been the most dominant when we talk about African literature, for example, I mean, the number of people have been shocked. They don't know, for example, about Tayyip Saleh, the season of migration to the north. Yet they, everyone, if you ask everyone, it's Achebe or Nugugi, and then, it's just it. You've got those two, but then, and you don't venture beyond those borders, And so for me, when you talk about African tradition, it's always been very, 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 very narrow and very defined and very, and the big problem for me has actually been the gatekeepers, Those people who tend to be from West Africa, from Kenya, from, going down to South Africa. And I think we have to challenge ourselves. We were having this conversation this morning, actually, we tend to forget, Frankfurt, Africa, for example, in that tradition, And so, for me, African literature isn't just about the written word, It's also about the filmmakers. I'm more influenced by Kamara, for example, who's, from Gambia, I think. And what it did to me, to my writing, and how it liberated me, and it freed me, and it kind of showed me, like, actually, there are no borders area, but you can go anywhere, you can follow your characters everywhere. And it's the same, like, when I tell people, I spent, like, 8 years in a refugee camp, and there were no books, right? And so for me, the tradition of storytelling has been my mother, for example, when she used to send tapes from Saudi Arabia to Sudan, and how descriptive she was in her stories, And that's why description is incredibly important in my work. It's the most important element of my writing. And so, when you talk about African tradition, we also have to challenge ourselves, like, what do we mean by the question itself? And I think the challenge for especially those people who have the power in Nigeria or Kenya, on those places, is actually to challenge themselves too, and to to venture beyond and to go to North Africa, to East Africa, to the Horn of Africa, and there's great tradition there as well.
En fait, pour moi, quand je parle de littérature africaine, c'est qu'il y a plusieurs littératures africaines. Il n'y a pas une littérature africaine, il y a la littérature africaine ou les littératures africaines. Parce que quand parce qu'ici, par exemple, en Europe, c'est assez... on ne peut pas, par exemple, parler des littératures européennes parce que le thème de littérature européenne cache beaucoup de spécificités. La littérature allemande et la littérature autrichienne est différente de la littérature allemande, même si les deux pays écrivent dans la même langue. En Autriche, par exemple, il y a une question beaucoup plus qui résulte autour de l'utilisation, par exemple, de la langue. C'est-à-dire que des écrivains qui essaient, beaucoup comme le Peter Handke et autres, qui essaient la plupart des écrivains autrichiens, ce sont d'abord des poètes. Ils essaient d'utiliser la langue d'une manière poétique. C'est-à-dire que de mon point de vue, on ne peut pas parler d'une littérature africaine, mais de plusieurs littératures africaines. Mais en tant qu'écrivain, moi, j'essaie toujours, depuis quelques années, de m'inspirer de la littérature africaine traditionnelle, ou pour être précis, d'un genre littéraire congolais qu'on appelle le Kassala.
Ich finde, man kann nicht von der afrikanischen Literatur sprechen. Es gibt viel zu viele. Man muss von den afrikanischen Literaturen sprechen. Und ich finde, auch in Europa kann man nicht von der europäischen Literatur sprechen, denn schon die österreichische ist ganz anders als die deutsche, obwohl beide in derselben Sprache scheinbar geschrieben sind. Aber zum Beispiel wird in Österreich viel mehr darüber nachgedacht, zum Beispiel bei Peter Handke, über Fragen darüber, wie man Sprache überhaupt verwendet. Österreichische Schriftsteller sind meistens in erster Linie oder betrachten sich in erster Linie als Dichter und versuchen Sprache so gut wie möglich poetisch zu verwenden, auf eine poetische Weise. Deswegen finde ich auch, kann man nicht von einer afrikanischen Literatur sprechen. Ich versuche seit Jahren zunehmend, mich von literarischen afrikanischen Literaturen zu inspirieren, vor allem von einer Erzähltradition aus dem Kongo, die Kasala heißt.
Also je voudrais juste dire, utiliser le Kasala comme mon nom. C'est-à-dire que le Kasala, en fait, consiste à dire de bonnes choses sur soi-même. C'est une forme d'auto-louange.
Der Kasala besteht in erster Linie daraus, dass man gute Dinge über sich selber sagt, also eine Selbstlobpreisung sozusagen.
Donc je peux faire même maintenant, also je peux dire un Kasala de mon nom juste. Ouais.
Also ich könnte auch jetzt spontan über meinen eigenen Namen ein Kasala machen.
Mwanza Mujila, Mwanza Mbala, Kilo Walubanza Nkulu Mwetu, Walubanza Nkulu, on fait les amis, Walubanza Nkulu, Abakwesu Malangwiyo, Malangoyo, Abakwesu Malangwiyo, Malangoyo, Walele Kilubanza, Mwanza Mujila, Mwanza Mbala, Mwanza Nkangi, Fiso Mwanza Mujila, Kilo Walubanza Nkulu Mwetu.
I seem to always have to follow.
I don't have you once again.
So I need a little door in the floor so I can just disappear. Okay, everybody has said the thing that, you know, it's difficult to define what African literature and tradition is. So I'm not going to follow up. I'm going to also talk about myself and say that maybe it is quite a surprise for me that I get included. I don't always get included in African literature because I think there is it depends a little bit who can be part and who not, and it depends who, as you said, the gatekeepers are. And obviously, I write a lot about queer issues, and it depends who is talking about African tradition or African literature, whether that's allowed to come through the door or not. So yeah, I think for me at the moment it's very interesting and an exciting time. I know that 20 years ago I never would have imagined to be on a lot of African literature or African book fest with a book around queer issues.
That's because we define, this the question of diversity just like black and white.
Yeah.
And, because we tend to forget, like, there's also diversity within, the African literature, like you said, we're rich with LGBTQI+.
And there is, obviously, there's lots of stuff going on, but it doesn't always get amplified in that same way. I think so. Yeah. And I know definitely what... So when I went to Nigeria to launch the book there, I was expecting something that I know that when it comes to those types of diversity issues, then I was, she's German. When it comes to other things, I get, oh no, she's Nigerian, I have a PhD, oh yeah, she's Nigerian, that's a good, that's a very proud Nigerian moment. But the LGBTQ, speaking about that, so I think, But things are definitely changing.
Of course.
And now finally we can talk about languages. I was just reminded by the co-curator. Okay, so languages play. How do you play with language? Just to make the co-curator happy. What's your relationship to language? How do you play with language?
Read something?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So I'm going to read first, and I'm going to read really, really well, and then somebody has to follow me. Oh, now the pressure is on.
Exactly.
The pressure is on, okay. Anyway, so I'm reading from my novel, and just because I selected something where Carl, who's, urban Londonite and has this what I call urban speak, very much language steeped in youth culture, is going to Nigeria, and he makes his best friend is a Ogoni activist, and they play a lot with language. So they're teaching each other the equivalent pidgin. So Well, that's my offering anyway. And it is that chapter that you,
Okay, the one that
the
is-
25. Home is always holding hands without touching. Are you sleeping?
Can you maybe talk a little bit about how you titled your chapters? Because it's
Yeah, so all the chapters have little little sayings, and that's my nod to Yoruba culture and proverbs. And sometimes, you know, Yoruba proverbs are quite not always obvious unless you know what they mean. Mine are probably a bit more accessible, but they're also related to the narrator, which is the Yoruba God issue of the who is concerned with language. So they're a little bit of a meta text. So you could think about this here in relation to the chapter, or you can just enjoy it. So those that's how they came about. Home is always holding hands without touching. Are you sleeping? Nakali laughed. Waiting you to do, my friend. You they wash with toothbrush? Carl laughed too. I'm just so tired, Nakali. I needed a minute. I did get some, my friend. No, it doesn't work like that. I get it or pigeon, not both. Why not? Nakali made bloody sense, like usual. Carl was lost in his track. Not sure, you're right. Just say I did get you. You could teach me proper London pidgin, oh. For sure, but we do not call it pidgin. When had he become such an annoying smartass? It was dark. There was no electricity. It was beautiful that way, quiet. The neighborhood seemed to be rationing their generator fuel. The thick air lay on Carl's feet, pushing him into the ground. You want me to light a candle? Yes, now. You got to pack your things, so. Not really much, you know. I can do it in the morning. Carl lay down on the slim mattress. This was almost a reversal to London. You did all right. Nakali all were returning towards him, leaning on his side. So this is it's the night before Carl is returning to London. I should have said that. Yeah, how's the mat? Sorry, it must be so hard. We can swap. Me, I've slept too many nights like this, so no be special like for you, your people. Yeah. Carl was tired of jokes, tired of everything. Nakale, waiting, my brother. I got something to tell you. The what's of life, which one should you convey? All or none, or stick to the graduations? I'm going to leave it here because there's a big reveal coming up and I just realized I have not contextualized it. So anyway, I hope this gives you a small idea of how they're playing with language and they're trying to meet each other halfway. And perhaps as we discuss, I'll say a little bit more.
Sorry. Oh, thank you.
So,
I meant to drop the mic, actually.
should I go?
Yeah, sure.
All right. When I thought about this whole languages play, it's a very, it's very interesting and hard, difficult thing to actually explain. But I'm thinking of play as a mode of creating spaces as a more language as enabling creativity. Language as enabling you to innovate, to enjoy, like children play, to enjoy, to open doors to different possibilities. Language as an enabler of you looking and in different directions, looking back, looking in the present, looking forward. But I also think of it as language as a means of expansion, in terms of making you think in terms of sound, making you think in terms of image, making you think in terms of, figures of speech. And I also thought that language as a means of making you cross different languages. You could switch, like they were doing. One was talking in standard English and the other was talking in dialect. For me, as someone who really likes to think, to read poetry, language as ambiguous is very. I like to work with the ambiguity of language, being able to work in paradox, being able to play around also with sound. And if you allow me, I read Mother Sing a Lullaby. This is a short poem. Don't worry, this one is short. This one is called Mother Sing a Lullaby. It was written just after, it's a very old poem. It was written just after the 1994 Rwandan genocide. So it's Mother Sing a Lullaby after the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Mother sing a lullaby as the dark descends on trees, shutting out shadows. The sensuous voices swish and swirl around shrubs and overgrown grass, hiding mountains of decapitated dead and the glint of machetes that slashed shrieking throats. In these camps without happiness, mothers maintain the melody of life, capturing wistful wind to sing strength into the souls of children who have never known the taste of morning porridge or heard the chirrup of crickets in the evenings. Mothers sing a lullaby for the staring faces who cringe at the sound of footsteps whose playmates are grinning skeletons. Mothers become a lullaby, silencing the sirens of sorrow, restoring compassion to the nation.
Par exemple, quand j'écris en allemand, je me considère comme un maçon. C'est-à-dire que je dois d'abord récolter les mots. Je dois récolter des mots pendant plusieurs mois. Et puis quand je commence à écrire, chaque fois, avant d'écrire, j'essaie de lire tous les mots que j'ai collectés. Ça peut être dans des lieux de socialisation, dans des supermarchés, partout. Et donc avant d'écrire, je lis d'abord tout ce que j'ai collecté comme mots. Et je commence à écrire. Et quand j'écris en allemand, quand je n'ai pas le mot que je voudrais, j'écris en français. C'est-à-dire qu'un texte en allemand est toujours pour moi comme une forme de palimpeste. Il y a des mots qui sont typiquement autrichiens ou qui relèvent du dialecte, ou des mots comme Birchen, qui sont des mots plutôt allemands.
Wenn ich auf Deutsch schreibe, dann betrachte ich mich als eine Art Steinmetz. Ich muss erst einmal die vielen, vielen Worte ernten, die ich über Monate gesammelt habe. Und bevor ich dann anfange zu schreiben, schaue ich mir diese Liste mit den Wörtern an, die ich überall gesammelt habe, zum Beispiel auch im Supermarkt. Wenn ich mal ein deutsches Wort nicht finde beim Schreiben, dann nehme ich eben das französische Wort. Das Ganze wird dann eine Art Mosaik. Es gibt Wörter, die sind typisch deutsch, und es gibt welche, die sind typisch österreichisch, und so setzt sich das Ganze dann zusammen.
Écrire en français, pour moi, c'est comme, parce que le français reste ma langue de base, écrire en français, c'est comme écrire dans une langue morte, parce que je ne pratique pas la langue au quotidien, mais j'écris dans cette langue-là.
Und wenn ich auf Französisch schreibe, denn das ist ja im Grunde doch meine Basissprache, dann ist das aber ein bisschen, als würde ich in einer Totensprache schreiben, weil ich Französisch ja im Alltag nicht mehr benutze.
Mais de façon concrète, pour vivre comme écrivain, je travaille avec les musiciens. La plupart, c'est des musiciens de jazz.
Konkret ausgedrückt, um als Schriftsteller zu arbeiten, und für diese Arbeit arbeite ich, um das umzusetzen, mit Musikern, und die meisten davon sind Jazzmusiker.
Je voudrais lire juste un bout de texte en français et en allemand.
eine Probe auf Deutsch und auf Französisch.
Solitude 61. Dans mon ventre, dans mon ventre, c'est qu'on vit un fleuve, bougre, et fainéant, sale et immense, lugubre et vilain. Un fleuve, un fleuve. Un fleuve, un fleuve. Un fleuve en état avancé de dysenterie. Einsamkeit 71. Einsamkeit 71. In meinem Bauch trumpft sich ein Fluss. Gutmutig und träge. Gutmutig und träge. Dreckig und mächtig. Düster und böse. Ein Fluss. Ein Fluss. Ein Fluss. Ein Fluss im fortgeschrittenen Stadium der Ruhe.
It's in fact what you read. It was in fact the chapter that you read at the beginning, the Solitude number 71. Yeah.
Oh, what? Well, okay, I'm going to read it again. That's it, yeah. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Okay, I'll practice. Giving the moderator work.
Oh my God. Yeah. Do I have to follow up now? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Right. I think I'd like to go back to the presentation I did in my first session at this festival, which for me, I'm one of those people who think like sometimes to say I'm multilingual is also to say I'm multi-wounded, because some languages are acquired as a result of wars, exile, or parental abandonment. And so for me, it's been a case of like trying to accept the fact that, you know, our mother tongue has abandoned me, but finding an alternative and how to make it playful as well. I think that was very, very important to me. And I think like you were saying, if you allow yourself to be inspired by, you know, by other forms rather than just books, for example, like poetry or films or cinema or erotica, you know, all those kind of different elements, they enhance your language and they enable you to, I think, to make them much more playful. It's almost like every form of inspiration, you undressing the language, you know? And for me, that it's really important to undress a language until it becomes naked, because then you can dress it the way you feel like it, you know?
Things. I always say, I write in English exclusively, although German is my first language. And I always think, and the more I see other writers, that maybe that's where the freedom lies, because I have no allegiance to English. I don't feel like I have to be faithful, and I might not actually know proper English. Of course I do, but just if I needed to, I do. But that's that playfulness, and I like to find, because so many interesting things were said that I could relate to, and what you said about the space, finding the space, but also how do people meet. So the excerpt that I read is they have to try and negotiate how to meet. And of course, there was a long time I had to negotiate how I express myself, because I might not actually have all the words. And then you create new words, and then you create poetry and beauty in that. And that's what I was interested in, that not being faithful about the language, but also to find something that really embodies us, because I think it doesn't matter which language you speak, sometimes it doesn't fit. Yeah. And that's what you said about being naked. So you have to dress it anew, and then maybe you have to, and I always swear, maybe you have to fuck it up a little bit, so just it fits a little bit better.
But
do you
find like the fact that you don't write in your mother tongue, you're much more freer.
Yeah.
Because you're free from this idea of being faithful to the strict,
Yeah.
Grammatical, whatever interpretation of a mother tongue that you have to carry. Or
I think so. Initially, anyway. I think now I could be very playful in German, but I find it impossible because I find it really hard. But it's just about training. If I sat down and really did it, it would. But I think, I think so.
Do the Germans come?
That's very interesting because when I write in Luganda, I feel like I don't write with just words. I write with feeling. The emotions are vested in this language for me. So, and my writing in Luganda is almost writing from here, from the heart. And for example, the sound is very important for me, but it's not just sound, it's not just pure sound, but it's sound with feeling, emotion. So any slight change in sound, any slight change in the word may mean shades of meaning, different at different levels. So.
Yes, I feel that, when I started writing, I was a spoken word artist and I wrote a lot in German as well. And it was about a lot of racist experiences. And I needed English to have a distance to it, because if I was going to express these things in German, it would really actually crush me. So in a way, it is the same. It's just that I have to use it in the opposite way. So maybe it's a
I think
remnant.
you're absolutely right, because I was thinking about the same thing when I was writing Silence. Because Saba, she started learning English in a refugee camp. And I was thinking, why? And I think the feeling it gave me was this idea of refuge. Because we don't seek, we always think like we sometimes seek refuge in another country, but also we sometimes seek refuge in another language, And that's really important to also realize how much comfort you can get in a language, even though you don't speak it properly, just to feel much more freer to express yourself, Definitely.
Yeah, can I ask how we're doing time-wise? Because I would like to open it up if... Okay. All right, okay, good. Okay, music. And now let's play the game I wanted us to play. Word association. How does music to you, music in your writing, music as language?
I relate very much to what you said about the sound. I come from spoken word, so even a novel, it needs to sound right. I need to love reading it, and I need to find the musicality into it first. So I'm always invested in voice. Music is there, of course. When we speak of nothing, has this wonderful tagline, which I didn't write, but I was not in here. If Gwai music was a novel, this would be it. So the rhythm and the fastness is from urban UK music, and it inspires. And I think it's always different for each different text. But I think music is the musicality of the voice. That's the most important thing to me.
And this is a very, I'm aware this is a layered question. When as a child, I was very fascinated and attracted to music, and wanted to always listen to the radio. And I lived for some time with my aunt, the sister to my father, and she was a very staunch, very pious Christian, and I would pick up these sounds from the radio and start to play with them, because they kind of created a free space in my mind. So I would sing, and then she would be very upset. She didn't want me to sing. I think she very quickly, she was a very intelligent woman. She never went to school, but she was extremely intelligent, because then she thought she would replace my fascination with the local songs with the Psalms. And the Psalms were very exciting to me as a child. And I learned the Psalms in Luganda. Psalm 23, Mkama Yemsumba Wange Seta Genga, and then also in the space of Luganda where they play songs, I still am an old woman But I still love the place songs I learned in Luganda. Kagwa, kagwa, kagwa ya laila, echiri mugulu, echiri watuka, enseli kankana, omwana omuto, aliita nyina omukulu naite ngozi, emu, zali bbiri okuzaala kaligania kazala, akyetondeke kitoke bale kituli turuba.
En fait, pour moi, je considère toujours le texte écrit comme une prison, parce que le mot reste renfermé. Et donc, pour tout texte, j'ai toujours deux versions. Il y a la version écrite et il y a la version orale qui me permet, à la lecture, de faire des improvisations.
Ich betrachte den geschriebenen Text eigentlich als eine Art Gefängnis. Denn darin bleibt das Wort eingesperrt. Deswegen mache ich von jedem Text zwei Versionen. Eine rein schriftliche und eine, die mir die Freiheit lässt zu improvisieren.
Et donc, quand on apprend, par exemple, on commence à écrire dans un pays comme le Congo, c'est que d'une manière ou d'une autre, on est lié à la musique. Parce que la musique, elle est partout. Elle est dans la rue, elle est dans les églises de réveil. C'est-à-dire que partout, il y a de la musique, partout, il y a de bruit. Et donc, les bruits font partie de l'architecture.
Wenn man das Schreiben in einem Land wie dem Kongo lernt, dann ist es unweigerlich mit der Musik verbunden, denn dort gibt es überall Musik. Auf den Straßen, in den Kirchen, überall sind Geräusche und die Geräusche werden automatisch Teil der Architektur.
Donc, d'une certaine manière, la musique fait partie de l'écriture ou du processus d'écrire.
Deswegen gehört die Musik unweigerlich zum Prozess des Schreibens dazu.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obsessed with listening to music in foreign languages. I mean, I'm obsessed with Cesaria Evora, for example. And going back to the first short story I wrote when I was in Kenya. Yeah, it's just, there's something about, I've always felt like if I wanted to do a book, I wanted to do a book that sounded like her songs, you know? Full of sorrow, full of love, full of sensuality, full of playfulness, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to write a song for her, you know, for Cesaria Evora. And I guess, like, I still feel like it's something that pushes me, the fact that it's a dream that will never be realized because she's no longer with us. But it feels like, yeah, she plays a huge part in making me dance with my prose.
Sex?
Yeah.
Love making?
Now we're talking. What about it?
Yeah, let's talk about sex.
Sex is a language too, right?
Yeah, it's a language. Like how does sexuality, sex, play in your writings? And if you have an erotic passage to read, that would be even better.
Find it.
All right, yeah.
Maybe your answers will take me a while.
Anyone, please? Oh, that's my... All right, thank you. Oh, no, I was going to ask you, actually. You did a good job yesterday.
As people maybe look at me.
Please.
As people find
Erotica.
Erotica in their
I can't help it.
I think I'd like to relate to the question of sexuality because it's a very, coming from Uganda, it's a very serious question. And I think that there are so many things said and unsaid, and there even, there's a legislation in my country. If you are not what they call straight, then you are not accepted. So there's so many things that, especially on the African continent in general, there are also these Pentecostal, extreme right churches churches. You go to church, and I like going to church. You go to church, and then the preacher, and sometimes, unfortunately for me, always male, is waving his Bible and is saying, things like the husband is the head of the family and women must submit, and I am married and I'm married to a woman, and all these things. And it's very disturbing because, and then you also get these narratives, like when you say I'm from Uganda, everyone says, oh, like they think you're, homophobic. And you always want to explain yourself, but I've stopped explaining myself. But you always want to explain yourself and to say, well, I have friends. And it's not like that in Uganda. In ordinary Uganda, Bibi has been, and ordinary Ugandans live like ordinary Ugandans. But there are people who think that once you get onto the street anywhere in Uganda, people are going to grab you and ask you, are you straight or are you something else? And this is a very complex thing. But also, living in Uganda as a single person. I'm single and woman, and obviously people begin to think, why are you single, or this, where are your children? Well, it becomes very complex, and it's a very difficult question to answer. Let me not ramble, let me let others.
I just wanted to add to that because that's one of the things I try to do when we speak of nothing, sort of subvert the idea who's most progressive in the world, because it's always Uganda comes up. There was even a BBC program, the worst place to be LGBTQ. But thanks to Brexit, everything is on the table again in the UK, and hate crimes, and they were always there, but hate crimes against LGBTQs have gone up like crazy. So, this idea that it's heaven, we have good laws, that's right. But that doesn't mean that you're safe walking down the street. So, people still have to constantly edit and be mindful where they are. So I just wanted to add that because I know that's always, you're going to Nigeria, you're going to Uganda. Anyway, so I found my little lovemaking scene. I'm cutting some things out so that there's not too much revealing of things. Well, it's just a love scene. You'll understand it because it's the language of love. So she laughed again. It was a different laugh, thoughtful, slow. I like you. I have a quick mouth, I know, but I was just waiting for you to do something. You are driving me crazy. I wasn't surprised. I was relieved that is going somewhere finally. Now he was laughing. You want me that bad? Ha, mister, I've done stuff. I have. And what exactly does that mean? Tell me everything about doing stuff. Carl is 17, so he's trying to impress. She looked at him, a hand on her hip. Please. He laughed again, not even embarrassed. She was playing and it felt good. Don't torture me. You won. I'm in apprenticeship still waiting to happen. I'm in your hands. She looked at the floor, then at him again. Her voice was quiet. No, Carl, I'm in yours. Then we're on the same boat. The hands went everywhere, the lips, the mouth. Their clothes piled around them. Their naked skin touched the cement. It helped. It helped cool the heat that rose from the skin. It was strange to have his body all exposed, to show everything. Stranger even to have hers like that, close up. She was so soft it tickled him each time her skin touched his body, especially when her hands traveled down his arms or up his legs, worst at the back, up the spine. The hair stood, but it felt good. Her hand took his and guided it until he was inside her, moved it so that he could feel what felt best for her. Janoma opened, leaning her back against the wall of the shack, and reached with her hand between Carl's legs. Carl knelt, his hand deeper, his face between her thighs now until her stickiness spread past his lips, all over his chin, and she moaned, trying to hide the sounds from the outside world. The heat seemed trapped inside their bodies, spreading and trying to push out. Pushed and pushed until her legs clamped his face and she moved her head. Opened her eyes to look at him. He was panting. When he leaned back, her hand slid out between his legs. Not bad, your stuff. Januma's breath was still rhythmic, trying to quieten down. Yours neither. And both giggled, rolling onto the patches of clothing that protected them from the bare concrete. Carl stroked her hair along the lines of the even rows. It smelled of shampoo, hair oil, and sweat. She leaned on her forearm and looked at him. Her voice was closer than before, different. There was a themness about it. You are buzzing. I know, he replied. What you do to me? No, I mean your phone. The moments that are not savored in full because they stop sooner than they unfold. Then the phone keeps ringing. You know how it is.
Do you want to go? I'm one of those people actually who think writers shouldn't hold back when they write about sex. In the UK, we have this award called the Bad Sex Award, and I think it's a very Victorian way of looking at novels. And I'm really actually thinking to set up my own award called the Good Sex Award. Because it's really important, because it comes from experience. Like when I wrote my first novel, and I was immediately very explicit, It's just natural instinct of mine to be explicit with a language, in the way it's like sometimes I think there's a room for show, don't tell, but also there's a room for vice versa, tell, don't show, right? I think sometimes we need to combine ambiguity with something that is very less complex, Because real world isn't just about straitjacketing us with certain rules about writing, And so with this novel, and the reason it took 10 years is because initially I started working with some agents, and they found some of the scene very explicit. So I've ended those relationships, and I've just wanted to do the book I really wanted to do, And so I was very happy to find Ella, who actually was very supportive. And that's why I think she was very, very important to me to write the book I wanted to write. So I'm going to read a scene now, which we read someone read here yesterday, and she did a great job. And so she said, no, I won't do it again, so I have to read it myself. And it's not going to be the same. But, because I'm one of those writers who actually don't like to read. But here we go. So this scene was inspired, I wouldn't say inspired, but a Japanese artist. He was one of those people that really, when I was writing it and I, looking at his work, was incredibly important. So, I still recall that summer evening inside Cinema Silenzio when a naked Saba crouched on my face. My eyes traveled across the long back of this woman I had loved since the first night in the camp. Above her arched neck, the stars glimmered around the moon. The call to the last prayer of the day was being announced via the plastic megaphone. Saba rearranged herself, spreading the map of love over me. This is our time, she said. This is my time. I wanted to speak, but I was breathless. Saba caressed my face as I inhaled the scent of her history, the battles she had won and lost, her rage, her frustrated dreams, the violence on her thighs, the river of desire inside her womb. She let go. She filled my mouth from her rivers, so warm that as it slid inside me through my throat, I felt riches invading me, gushing towards my soul, the white Nile and its water running between my ribs. The string of the singer's choir played a mournful song nearby, the forest whistle, the impious breeze of that summer wafted against my cheeks. Like a famished soul, I tried to grasp for the warm air, my hands fluttering at my side. Saba pushed down with her weight, screwing the lock of my existence to her being even more. North and south finally reunited, Saba erasing the boundaries that have separated us for so long. Thank you.
So why don't we? We can continue with the word association, but maybe we can also take a few questions. From if you have any burning questions or comments, or if you have your own sex scenes to read. How could this be? Okay, yeah, there's one question at the back.
Yeah, do you hear me? Yeah. Thank you so much for this interesting panel. I was kind of thinking, because you're all published authors, like this, like becoming, or I think that for all of you, playing with the language is probably part of your life, and also like, not just becoming authors, but becoming who you are, and it probably started at an early age, but this, like not being published, and not like, where did you find your audiences, or how did you, like, when did you know, okay, I'm a writer, like playing with words is my life, what you said, Susan Chiguli. So before you had like a readership, actually.
Becoming a writer, or knowing actually that writing is something that made my life come alive, was a process, because I was one of those annoying children who never stopped talking, even when, like when mom would say, their visitors, listen to them and don't talk. Then I will sit like that on the edge of a chair, and then someone would say something, and I would forget that I was not adult, and I'd say, and I also think. And so words and writing and composing are kind of interwoven in my life. It's my love for words, my love for combining them, for sometimes putting them upside down, playing with meaning, that drove my sense of writing. When I was in high school, we had what our headmistress called long assembly, where the headmistress would read to you, and we all pretended we didn't like it until she stopped it, and the whole school was in tears. They wanted her to read again. But we also had short assembly, where you would go to your own class, and you were supposed to read to the class. Each one was supposed to write and read. And when in my class, when it was my turn to write, I wrote a small piece about the fly, and everybody liked it, and they voted me their class poet. And so that's how I started writing for my friends, and that's how I view writing. I don't write for a big audience. I write for friends. I write for people. My audience should be near to me. It should be familiar.
En fait, moi, je dois dire qu'au Congo, on est tous plus ou moins des autodidactes. C'est-à-dire que les gens ont cette habitude de quitter leur zone de confort pour essayer quelque chose d'autre. Par exemple, si tu as une panne sèche avec ta voiture, tu as un problème avec ta voiture, tu vas rencontrer sur 10 Congolais, au moins 8 Congolais qui diront qu'ils peuvent t'aider à te dépanner.
Ich muss sagen, im Kongo sind wir eigentlich alle mehr oder weniger Autodidakten. Wir sind alle daran gewöhnt, unsere Komfortzone zu verlassen und was Neues auszuprobieren. Wenn man also zum Beispiel eine Panne hat mit seinem Auto, wird man von 10 Leuten, die man fragt, mindestens 8 finden, die das Auto reparieren können.
Donc, c'est-à-dire que quand un étudiant commence sa première année de médecine, on l'appelle déjà médecin ou docteur.
Was dazu führt, dass zum Beispiel, wenn jemand in seinem ersten Medizinstudienjahr ist, die Leute ihn schon Arzt oder Doktor nennen.
Et donc moi, de mon côté, c'est que quand j'ai écrit mon premier poème, on m'appelait déjà écrivain.
Und sobald ich mein erstes Gedicht geschrieben hatte, hat man mich schon Schriftsteller genannt.
Et donc, au pays, par exemple, quand je rentre, des fois, il y a des gens qui te donnent tout le nom. Jean-Paul Sartre, Moudimbe, donc on te colle tout le nom.
Und wenn ich nach Hause komme, dann kommen die Leute sofort mit allen Namen, die sie kennen, Jean-Paul Sartre und so weiter und so weiter.
Et donc, d'une certaine manière, quand les gens des fois, il y a certains qui pensent vraiment que tu es écrivain, même quand tu n'as écrit qu'un seul poème. Et donc, du coup, d'une certaine façon, tu prends conscience que tu peux devenir écrivain.
Das heißt, die Leute denken wirklich, du seist Schriftsteller, selbst wenn du noch keine Zeile geschrieben hast. Und irgendwann glaubst du einfach selber daran, dass du Schriftsteller werden kannst.
Et donc, pour moi, c'est pourquoi je dis, même quand je suis arrivé, par exemple, en Autriche, je commençais à essayer d'écrire en allemand, parce qu'il y a déjà cette culture-là de quitter sa zone de confort, de tout essayer.
Und als ich deswegen nach Österreich kam, war es ziemlich selbstverständlich, dass ich überhaupt in Betracht ziehen konnte, auf Deutsch zu schreiben, weil es diese Gewohnheit gab, aus seiner Komfortzone auszutreten.
I think there were two questions, right? When we started, and then the question of audience. Yeah. I wasn't somebody who spoke a lot, but I had a super rich imagination. And when I loved stories. And when I learned writing at age 6, which is when you go to school here, I thought, oh, somebody's putting them together. And I declared, okay, I'm going to be a writer. So that's my biggest achievement, is that I seem to have a one-track mind. I take a lot of different routes, but I do arrive there. I think, and then my real coming of age as a writer probably is very closely related to the Black German community, where there was a magazine we had back in the day called Afro Look, and that's where I published my first poem when I was 13. And I got, because it's a close-knit but very strong, and it's a small community but very strong, so the being taken serious so early on was quite a thing. So I think from 19 on, when I started sort of gigging as a poet and a spoken word artist and working with musicians, that's when I was just a poet. And I would get that, maybe similar to you, I would get that sort of mirrored back from the community, and so all the rest sort of followed later on.
Thank you. Well, I think for me, I was a very, very silent kid. And that's why I'm really bad at telling stories orally, as opposed to actually, thank you, to writing them. So, yeah, I mean, that's my strength, just sitting by myself and being my own audience, you know. It's a funny balance between writing for readers and writing for a book for yourself. I think, for me, the act of writing has to be a solitary act. And readers should not interfere with that process, you know. And so I don't allow. I have very thick curtain between myself and the readers, and that's why I tell my agent and editors, if we're working together, that's one thing I don't like to be reminded of, because there's this idea that, you know, you have to think of your reader. I really hate that notion. I think, and then what happens is, once you come out with a book, and then I think readers will find that book, will find honesty in that book, and they will find, like, actually you've dedicated yourself to your craft, and so as a result they will see a writing for what it is, you know, not it's in presumption attempt to kind of appeal to a reader. Anyway, what reader are we talking about? We're talking here about global, you know, even within one community we have diverse tastes, like you see today, you know. As opposed to audience, I'm very lucky that I receive letters from literally from all over the world, you know, from Thailand, Russia, you know, Iraq, and those kind of places. You know, it's been a slow process for for Eritrean and Ethiopian to catch up with me, because obviously they find the kind of themes and the subjects I deal with quite confronting. But you know, now more and more, the more I go to kind of places like yesterday, you know, there were Eritrean and Ethiopian, and so like it's happening more and more, like we're opening up for each other, because I'm not going to change for anybody. And if someone's going to find my writing interesting, that's great. If not, there's nothing I can do, because the act of writing is act, for me, like I said, I write for myself first of all. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to say that when I remember when I was 13, a teacher quoted George Orwell and said that we should think about writer, the word writer, and see what letter is in the middle. And writer, I is in the middle. And she was telling us that when you can be able to write for yourself, then you are able to write for humanity because you are a human, a person who then you relate to other people. So I think that's interesting.
Who, me? Oh. Yeah, so, I mean, I'd been writing all my life, actually. You know, I remember my first poem, I was about maybe 9 or so. I don't know if it was a good poem. You know, but I was about 9. So, but the one time when I thought of myself as a writer was when I got invited to there was a festival in Ohio. I was about maybe 27 or so. And when I got there, there was a big poster that said, Mukama Wagoge, main stage poet. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm a poet. And so nothing exciting, actually. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Yeah, my question might sound very simple, but the issue came up when it comes to your connecting with audiences. Do you always feel comfortable with the covers of your books? Because I just talked to somebody who said he would have overlooked a book if he hadn't met the author here. He wouldn't have bought the book. The
which
cover
book was it?
Deterred him. I'm not going to name names,
that's
but
my book, the first novel, right? I know.
Yeah, I mean, there was this. It was almost like a satirical piece where they took all the covers, African book covers, you know, where they always have either an animal or yeah. So and at that point, my book was getting translated into French, and they had that sort of a cover. So all I did was to send them that article, you know, and they changed it. Yeah, certainly. With Nairobi Heat, the American version has a cover of a gun, you know. It's a beautiful cover, you know, but again, you have to think about, you know, this sort of, you know, this sort of message that's sent about the continent. But for me, I was like, it's a beautiful cover. I can't, you know. On the other hand, the German covers, you know, they are too literal. Yeah, let me just leave it at that.
I think, if I can, I think, because what happened was a person came and, you know, she saw my first novel, The Consequences of Love, and the cover, and he said to her, like, I wouldn't have bought the book if I hadn't been to his presentation yesterday. And I think it was, I really had horrid time with the first novel because when it came out and, you know, it was translated like more than 20 languages, and all the publishers, you know, went for the woman in veil, right? Well, the book is told from a perspective of a boy. So I told them, I urged them, like, to do something, you know, I thought I was being quite, like, original in my story, you know. I wasn't, of course, women were part of the story, but women are invisible for boys growing up in Saudi Arabia. So I thought to them, do something original with, you know, boy rather than a veil. And I think one of the failure of that book selling was, I think, the cover. And that's why before my book was acquired by Ella, I met with her in Brixton and we had this discussion. And I told her frankly, like, my really main interest is the cover, you know. And I told her, like, please, I urge her. And so I was very lucky because this is I think it's quite nice cover. It's inspired by Dali's work, you know, surreal art, and so the guy is the Salu is Nigerian actually, who designed it, and I really love it, and so yeah, I've learned a hard lesson, and so, like, you know, it's really important to keep pressing that point. That a cover really is important. Yeah. Was it the same for you?
I love my cover, and I love the covers of all my books, but there's the one there was one issue we had, and I co-authored a short story collection with Annie Holmes called Breach. And I know we both didn't like the image they chose. And we were very swiftly put in our place. Very swiftly it was clear that the publisher thought this was the right way to go. And then it came out and then we loved it. It was actually the same thing. So I don't know what... and I think Bibi told a similar story that sometimes on first reaction, as author can have a really strong reaction about a cover. I think Bibi, the other day we did an event and Bibi was telling a story about when maybe 2 days later you think differently about it. And that happened with Breach. We both loved it later. But this one I loved. Come on, look at it. It's pretty awesome.
For me, we covered the first cover for my first book. My own collection was the African Saga, and the publisher chose the cover, and I liked the bright colors and didn't look very closely. And then one day someone came and said, why is that male face dominant in and I had never actually thought about it. I actually even thought that round thing was the sun and not the male face. But when you look closely, actually it is. And I and then I started having very a challenge really accepting the cover. But the second it's a very fascinating cover, but it's sold out, so I can't show you. Yeah.
En fait, moi j'ai toujours eu plus ou moins la chance avec mes éditeurs. C'est-à-dire que la plupart font de couvertures plus ou moins abstraites, hein, comme celle-ci.
Ich finde, ich hatte eigentlich meistens Glück mit meinen Herausgebern. Die meisten Cover sind ziemlich abstrakt, so wie das hier.
Ja.
I also like your cover for the Trump.
Yeah, Trump.
Yeah, there are two questions. Okay, the mic.
I don't know who wants to go first. Okay. Well, my comment or question refers to the potentials and limitations of being multilingual or being able to express oneself in different languages, because I always feel like being able to do so is also an opportunity to express different parts of personality in oneself. For example, I have a friend from Uruguay, and when I first met him, we were only able to speak German because I didn't speak Spanish. But over the years, I learned Spanish, so I could also speak Spanish to him. And when he speaks German, he speaks perfectly German, but he speaks very slowly. And when I finally was able to speak Spanish with him, was like he suddenly became a different person, or at least I was able to see him in a different life, and he revealed a different part of his personality. So I was wondering, Olumide, since I was making two connections between things that you have said, because you said in the beginning that you are rather taking a distance to your own books in terms when speaking of biography. So, and then you said that even though your first language is German, you rather write in English. So I was wondering, is that because you try to, I don't know, keep this distance from what you write and then yourself? What role does language play in that?
I think the problem is there's a long trajectory, so there's different reasons. So in the beginning, for instance, when I was starting out as a spoken word artist, I was doing my spoken word in English and German, which was probably a very nice, complete time, because I had both of these things in it. They don't call it code switching for no reason, because it means not just a different language, but it means, you're wearing a different body almost. You're embodying yourself in a different way in this different language. And my English is usually always very close to pidgin or dialect, because that's where I learned English. So I learned good English in my late 20s. Yeah, before that it's coming from Nigeria. But so in the beginning, when I started writing in Germany, where a lot of it was about inserting yourself in the landscape, like saying actually Black Germans do exist. So even not every poem was about that. That was sort of the trope. And then sometimes that distance needed to be there. So we brought out a book called Talking Home, which is a collection, the first collection of women of color in Germany. And it was in English because we needed that distance, because there was a lot of traumatic things that were gone through language. And the Germans will know there's certain names we get called, and that was my, my project in my childhood, to say, no, actually you're not allowed to say that to me. So, that's that. Nowadays, it's not the distance anymore, it's just reality. That I've lived in London for more than a decade. And because I'm interested in accents and urban languages and slang and slippages and hybridity, and I have not yet found the German way to do that. Yeah. So I'm very interested. I'm really waiting for a commission where I can sit down and find a language that would maybe be like a broken black German. And you can do that. I know you can, but there's not a lot of, we don't have a lot of examples. Like we have that, like Sprache, we have that for the Turkish community, but we don't have the precedents yet, I think. So, but there's different reasons at different times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thank you.
If writing is a very personal process, as most of you said, or that you in the first place write for yourself, and I think yesterday or the day before someone said, I think it was Paul Bandier, that writers actually depend or needs critiques or critical feedback on their writings. Where is for you kind of the threshold or the line to say, okay, keep that critiques to your own, or where you start to reflect upon that, or yep.
I think that critics are necessary, because I find that when someone writes and no one responds, being a critic doesn't mean it will be negative. So no one responds to the work. That work is almost like not read, even when some people are reading it privately. I think it's important when voices that reach more than just one person come out and actually do respond to the work. But I also think I wouldn't want to be tied down to always following what the critics say. But I'm very, for example, for the case of the African saga, why it sold out very, very fast in Uganda is because the first critic that wrote and put in the newspaper said it was so violent, it should be hidden away. It was such a bad reflection of Uganda. So everybody ran and bought the book, and they are looking for me to sign it, even, where at my place of work, because this critic had gone and said all these bad things. So I love that critic very much.
En fait, pour ma part, je pense que quand j'écris un texte, je le fais d'abord lire à mon entourage, des amis ou de membres de la famille. Et là, je sais que j'ai souvent de points de vue qui sont plus ou moins sincères, qui ne sont pas liés avec le côté commercial, mercantile de la chose. Parce qu'un éditeur, il a une vision, il a une ligne directrice, il a des attentes de la part de ses lecteurs. Et donc, je fais d'abord lire le texte à des personnes de tout le jour, des gens, parfois même des personnes qui n'ont rien à voir avec la littérature. Et puis j'envoie le texte chez l'éditeur. Mais quand la critique, elle est positive, et là, pour moi, ça ne me dérange pas du tout.
Wenn ich einen Text schreibe, dann lasse ich ihn erst von Leuten um mich herum lesen, von Familienmitgliedern, von Freunden, und da bekomme ich dann ziemlich ehrliche Rückmeldungen von Leuten, die eben einfach mit dem ganzen kommerziellen Aspekt des Schreibens nichts zu tun haben. Denn wenn man mit einem Herausgeber zu tun hat, der hat natürlich eine Vorstellung, eine Vision, eine Linie, der denkt an die Erwartungen seines Publikums, und ich lasse meine Texte erstmal von gewöhnlichen Leuten lesen, auch solchen, die mit Literatur vielleicht gar nichts am Hut haben. Und danach schicke ich den Text erst an einen Verleger los. Wenn ich aber positive Kritiken bekomme, habe ich überhaupt nichts dagegen.
Je voulais juste ajouter, mais il faut dire qu'en tant qu'écrivain plus africain, si on peut utiliser l'expression, c'est-à-dire qu'on a une attente assez réaliste. C'est-à-dire qu'au Congo, quand les gens savent que tu es écrivain, ben, ils te disent, bon, tu sais, dans notre quartier, on n'a pas d'électricité. Dans ton prochain roman, il faut parler de ce qui se passe dans le quartier. C'est-à-dire que la littérature, elle est plutôt vue comme l'écrivain est vu comme un agent social. Hein. C'est-à-dire qu'on attend beaucoup du livre. On attend que le livre soit plutôt réaliste. Moi, on m'a reproché, plusieurs fois, on m'a reproché de ne pas pouvoir nommer les personnages, de ne pas pouvoir nommer les avenues ou les places de ma ville. Voilà. C'est-à-dire que de la part de l'écrivain africain, il y a une attente déjà de la part de son pays, des gens de la famille, et d'autre part, il y a une certaine attente de la part de l'éditeur et du lectorat occidental. Pour rebondir à la question, par exemple, de la sexualité, c'est-à-dire que, par exemple, dans mon roman Tram 83, il y a un personnage qui dit dans la littérature africaine, il faut qu'on baise aussi. C'est-à-dire que, par exemple, il y a la question de la sexualité qui est presque un tabou dans la littérature africaine. C'est-à-dire que quand il y a des scènes plus ou moins érotiques, il y a des lecteurs qui te disent qui se sentent gênés qu'il y ait des passages plus ou moins, je dirais, érotiques. Moi, on a eu à traiter, par exemple, mon roman de Poverty Porno parce qu'il y a des gens qui parlaient de leur propre vie. Donc, voilà, c'est un peu ça. C'est-à-dire en tant qu'écrivain africain, il y a les attentes sont de la part d'un lectorat africain, de l'éditeur, mais aussi d'un lectorat, je dirais, occidental.
Als afrikanischer, in Anführungsstrichen, Autor sieht man sich mit mehreren speziellen Erwartungen konfrontiert. Zu Hause im Kongo zum Beispiel, wenn die Leute wissen, dass man Schriftsteller ist, dann sagen sie sofort, hör mal zu, bei uns im Viertel gibt es keinen Strom, bitte kannst du in deinem nächsten Buch davon sprechen. Also der Schriftsteller wird auch eigentlich so ein bisschen als ein Sprecher des Volkes betrachtet. Und man erwartet auch sehr stark von dem Buch, dass es sehr realistisch sein soll. Mir ist auch schon vorgeworfen worden, dass ich die Personen und Orte in meinen Romanen nicht eindeutig benenne. Das erwartet man einfach von einem Buch im Kongo. Es gibt also diese Erwartungen auf der einen Seite in meinem Land, auf der anderen Seite aber eben auch von dem Lektorat in europäischen, westlichen Ländern. Ich möchte noch mal auf die Frage nach der Sexualität eingehen. In meinem Buch Tram 83 gibt es jemanden, der sagt, in der afrikanischen Literatur muss einfach auch gebumst werden. Denn sehr oft in der afrikanischen Literatur ist Sexualität ein Tabu. Und ich habe auch schon mit Herausgebern zu tun gehabt, die sich einfach sehr unwohl fühlten, wenn es erotische Passagen in meinen Romanen gab. Ein Roman von mir ist sogar als Armutsporno bezeichnet worden, weil darin einfach Leute von ihren Erfahrungen erzählt haben. Das heißt also, man hat mit sehr verschiedenen Erwartungshaltungen zu tun, je nachdem, wo man ist.
Can I quickly?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
No, I was saying, obviously with your second novel, you're much more relaxed about critics, you know. The first novel, you always want to read what people say. I mean, I do like in-depth reviews, obviously, when, you know, you can learn something. But my favorite critics have always been, you know, especially, that was my first novel, older Eritrean men and women who would call my mom and would actually give her feedback about my book. And then she would call me, you know, and she would tell me, did you write this book? Did you write this thing? And it's very interesting how, you know, and those were like very interesting, actually.
Any last words?
Just one comment on what you said. It's not just sexuality, but in literature in general, there's one thing missing, which is like women never have their periods. That's something I noticed. But anyway, that was not my question. We never have our periods in literature. Suleiman, the question is for you. I am going to read it because as a reaction to what you said about writing first and foremost for yourself, which is an audience of one. Why get published then? Why the need to be published if you're just writing for yourself?
It's a trick question.
Is it for everyone or
for you?
Because I think for me it's because I think it's like this, right? If you tell a story, you want to tell a story, you tell it to yourself, and then you write it down. And then, globally, I mean, in this room, for example, you have 100 people, let's say. I mean, some of them would read your book and some of them won't, right? If I am writing for readers in this room, who am I writing for? You, him, her, they, them, You might have a different taste. I'm not going to please you. I'm not going to please her. I'm not going to please them, But I think it's really important for me. I think the art of writing is surrendering to your characters, right? And then if it happens, I'm really totally relaxed. Otherwise, I would not have spent 10 years writing this book, right? I got like peanuts for it for 10 years, right? If I were really interested in the audience, right, in terms of how many books I was going to sell, how much I'm going to make, I would have gone about it totally differently, right?
I think there's a confusion, and I think a lot of confusions for writers. It's important to always, and I always say when I'm editing with writers, your audience is one thing, and your market is another. And I think what you're really addressing is your market. You're not writing for a market, but we often write for an audience, and even if it's an imaginary audience, that it might be a small person.
Yeah, a small person. Yes.
Yeah. So. It's not to confuse market and audience, and that's
I totally see. Yeah.
That's probably where the confusion.
But I see what you're saying has to do with protecting the creative process and creating an authentic story. And I'm not at all interested in this idea of authenticity. But you can't write something really good if you're not feeling it. And that's I think it's even more about this.
Yeah.
I'm writing for myself. It's like I need to sort of leave you out of here so that I can really find this story properly, and then you can do all these other things. So I think there's different layers to it. So market and audience, but also before we get there, I need to
exactly.
I
but
need to
also
be able to work.
And
if
this
I
is
think about you all the time.
And this is why, for me, I think it's really important when I'm, at least for many black editors and publishers, having to encourage writers, suspend the market, whereas many European publishers are already thinking about the market, and it's really important to suspend the market so that you can truly tell the story that you want to tell, and then the publishers will find the market for that, and I think that's what you're probably trying to get.
I'm trying to say exactly the same thing, because the idea of reader itself is problematic. That's what I'm trying to say.
Shall we end here? Let's end here. No, so that you have time to buy the books, so you don't have an excuse to say we ran out of time. So do not live without some of these books or all of them. Tram 83, When We Speak of Nothing, Silence is My Mother Tongue, The African Saga. You must own those 4 books one way or another. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you guys. Yeah. No, thank you.